The night of December 1944 was among the harshest on the Eastern Front. A night so thick with clouds that even the faintest moonlight could not pierce through and reach the frozen ground. Snow kept falling endlessly. The air was so cold that it stabbed any exposed skin like needles. And every whisper of wind moving between the trees felt like the shadow of something unseen. In that darkness, Lieutenant Elsa Braun, a young German communications officer, was running through the forest trail, carrying a secret message she had to deliver to her unit. The radio bag on her shoulder felt heavy, her breath rose in white clouds that vanished instantly. But she didn't slow down. She knew that a late message could mean the loss of dozens of lives. But destiny can often be more merciless than the snow itself. As Elsa moved through a narrow path, a sudden beam of blinding light struck her face. Within a heartbeat, footsteps surrounded her from all sides. And before she could react, someone grabbed her arms from behind and yanked her backward. She fell face first into the snow, the freezing surface cutting her lips and forcing her teeth to clench. A soldier with heavy boots leaned over her and growled, "Move." No sound. Before she could say anything, she was dragged to her feet. 5 enemy soldiers appeared around her, tired, cold, frustrated, but with a dangerous hunger in their eyes. She struggled, but 2 soldiers twisted her arms behind her and tied them tightly with a thick rope. The rope bit into her skin as if someone had pressed deep lines into her wrists with sharp nails. They dragged her into a broken wooden cabin nearby. Inside, a weak lantern flickered, throwing distorted shadows across the cracked walls. Elsa's boots were wet with snow, her feet nearly numb from cold, and her breath trembled in the icy air. The soldiers shoved her to the ground and stood over her like hunters who had cornered a lone prey. One of them, probably their leader, stepped closer and said, "Pretty officer. Long way from your lines." His smile was slow, unsettling, and full of intentions she instantly understood. Fear and anger surged inside Elsa, but she kept silent. In war, showing fear could often invite something far worse. One soldier stepped forward and lifted his hand toward her chin. Elsa jerked her head away with all her strength, refusing to give him even a second of control. The soldier's eyes flared with irritation. Another one leaned close to her, his breath cold enough to sting. And in his eyes she saw a dangerous intent, one that could freeze anyone's courage. He moved a little closer, as if preparing to force something upon her, but before anything could happen, a loud crash struck the outer wall of the cabin. A second later, gunshots cracked through the night. The soldiers' faces instantly changed from arrogance to panic. "Ambush! Who the hell?" the leader shouted as he grabbed his weapon and rushed outside. The others followed him hurriedly. The door swung open, icy wind burst into the cabin, and Elsa was left alone, still tied, still shaking, but now with a tiny thread of hope. Outside, gunfire lit the darkness again and again. Each burst echoed like a hammer inside Elsa's chest. Minutes passed like hours. She prayed silently that none of the soldiers would return inside. Slowly the gunfire weakened, and then heavy footsteps approached the cabin. Elsa tensed, fearing the worst. But then a familiar voice echoed in the German language. Rough, urgent, but comforting. "Is anyone inside?" Elsa gathered whatever strength she had left and shouted, "Here! I'm here!" The door burst open and 2 German soldiers rushed in. One lifted the lantern and immediately began cutting the ropes around her wrists. As soon as the ropes fell loose, Elsa collapsed onto the floor. Her wrists were red, throbbing with pain, but her face finally softened with tears of relief, tears that disappeared into the cold air before they could fall. They lifted her gently, wrapped her in a blanket, and carried her out into the night that was still brutally cold, but no longer as frightening as the air inside that cabin. They brought her to her captain, who stood near a small fire. He looked at her and said, "You're safe now." Those 2 words shattered the heavy tension she had carried for hours. Her eyes held a deep ache, but also a quiet victory. She had escaped a threatening shadow in the middle of a war that tested humanity every single day. Even long after the war ended, that night remained etched in Elsa's memory like a scar. She never spoke about it openly, but in her diary she wrote only one line. "I fought the war for my country, but that night I fought for my existence." The war tested my courage, but it also showed how easily humanity can drown in darkness. Yet even a small light can be enough to save someone.